I'm Ethan Reynolds, 28, standing at my wedding altar watching shock spread across my family's faces. It's been a long journey from being the overlooked second son to this moment of personal triumph. Growing up, my brother Mason always got the lion's share of everything: attention, resources, and unwavering support. When my parents mortgaged our family home to fund his business venture while denying my tuition requests, I finally understood my place in the family hierarchy. But life has a way of coming full circle. Before I dive into how my parents tried to hijack my wedding and what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to see how I finally stood up for myself after years of being second best. Growing up in the Reynolds household meant living in Mason's shadow. From my earliest memories, the pattern was clear. Mason, 3 years my senior, was the golden child while I was an afterthought. I remember my 10th birthday party, a small gathering with 3 friends at our local pizza place. 2 weeks earlier, Mason's 13th birthday had been a lavish backyard extravaganza with a hired DJ, catering, and nearly 30 guests. When I asked why my celebration was so much smaller, my mother Karen simply said, "Mason's birthday is special because he's becoming a teenager. You'll get a bigger party when it's your turn." But when I turned 13, the excuse changed to, "We need to save money right now, honey." This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. Mason received top-of-the-line baseball equipment despite showing minimal talent or interest in the sport, while I played soccer in hand-me-down cleats even as I made the travel team. His mediocre report cards earned celebrations at fancy restaurants, while my straight-A's were met with casual nods and, "That's what we expect from you." My father Robert always had justifications ready. "Your brother struggles more with school, so we need to really encourage his efforts," he'd explain. Or, "Mason needs more support to build his confidence." Meanwhile, I was supposedly self-sufficient and naturally talented, which somehow translated to receiving less attention and resources. During my junior year of high school, I won a prestigious state science competition with a project on renewable energy that qualified me for nationals. My parents attended the awards ceremony but left early because Mason had a recreational league basketball game. When I brought home the first place trophy, it sat on our mantel for 1 week before being relocated to my bedroom because it didn't match the living room decor. My high school graduation should have been my moment. I was valedictorian with a 4.0 GPA and had earned a partial scholarship to State University. During my speech, I spotted my parents in the audience, my mother dabbing proud tears. But at the family celebration afterward, the conversation quickly shifted to Mason's accomplishment of passing his final semester with C-minuses, narrowly avoiding summer school. "We're just so relieved," my mother gushed. "He really pulled through in the end." My academic achievement was reduced to a brief toast before dinner. Through these years, my best friend Tyler West was my sanity check. "Dude, your parents are straight up playing favorites," he'd say after witnessing particularly egregious examples. "That's not normal. You know that." Right. Tyler's family treated their children equally, making the contrast with my situation even more obvious. When I left for State University, I felt both relief and determination. Despite only receiving a partial scholarship, I declined my parents' offer of helping when they could. I had watched them freely spend on Mason's every whim and knew their financial support would come with strings attached. "Are you sure, honey?" my mother asked when I turned down their offer. "College is expensive." "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I've already lined up a job at the campus bookstore and another tutoring position." My father nodded approvingly. "That's smart, son." Building independence. What they didn't say, but what I clearly understood, financial help would be reserved for Mason, who had enrolled in community college after taking a gap year that consisted mostly of playing video games in our basement. My college routine quickly became grueling. Morning classes followed by afternoon shifts at the bookstore, evening tutoring sessions, and late nights studying. while my classmates enjoyed the full college experience. I was working 30 hours weekly on top of my course load. Meanwhile, Mason had dropped 2 classes in his first semester because they weren't his thing, and received a brand new car from our parents to make commuting to campus easier. During my sophomore year, I limited my visits home to major holidays. Each return revealed the same dynamic. Mason remained the focal point of family attention despite his minimal achievements. While my dean's list accomplishments earned perfunctory congratulations before the conversation shifted back to my brother, Tyler, who attended a university across the state, would meet me for coffee during breaks and shake his head at the stories. "Man, you're killing it on your own," he'd say. "They have no idea what they're missing by not giving you the support you deserve." I tried to make peace with it. "It's fine. It's making me stronger, more independent." "That's a great attitude," Tyler replied, "but it doesn't make what they're doing right." By the end of sophomore year, I had stopped sharing my accomplishments with my parents. The pattern of indifference had become too predictable, too painful. Instead, I channeled my energy into building my own future. One that wouldn't depend on the recognition or support I'd never received from my family. Little did I know that their favoritism would soon manifest in a way that would permanently alter our relationship. Junior year hit me like a freight train. My course load intensified with advanced computer science classes, and I added a third job grading papers for the math department to cover rising tuition costs. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. One Tuesday night in November, as I was coding in the 24-hour campus library at 2 a.m., my phone lit up with my mother's name. Late-night calls from parents are never good news, so my heart raced as I answered. "Ethan?" My mother's voice sounded thin and stressed. "I hope I didn't wake you." "No, I'm still studying." "What's wrong?" "It's complicated. Your father and I are having some financial difficulties. I think you should come home this weekend so we can talk in person." The vagueness was alarming. "Can you give me a hint about what's going on?" "It's about the house," she said quietly. "Just come home, please." That Friday, I skipped my afternoon classes and drove the 3 hours home in my deteriorating Honda Civic, which had recently crossed 200,000 miles. When I arrived, both my parents' cars were in the driveway. Unusual for a Friday afternoon when they normally worked. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. My father sat at the kitchen table with spreadsheets and bank statements scattered before him, while my mother nervously prepared coffee. Mason was conspicuously absent. "Where's Mason?" I asked after hugging my mother. My parents exchanged glances before my father responded. "He's at his new office space. He'll join us for dinner." "Office space?" This was the first I'd heard of any business venture. My mother gestured for me to sit. "That's part of what we need to discuss." Over the next half hour, my parents revealed the situation. They had taken out a second mortgage on our family home, the house I'd grown up in, that my grandparents had helped them buy, to provide capital for Mason's new business venture, a sports memorabilia shop in the local mall. "Mason has such a passion for collecting," my mother explained, as if this justified the massive financial risk. "And he's been struggling to find his path. This is something he really believes in." The amount they'd borrowed against the house shocked me, $185,000. Our home had been their largest asset, nearly paid off after 20 years of mortgage payments. "What about your retirement savings?" I asked, thinking of their frequent comments about preparing for the future. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We've had to use some of that too." Mason needed proper inventory to make a good impression. I sat there stunned, remembering my own request just 6 months earlier. I'd approached them about helping with my $15,000 tuition shortfall after my housing costs increased. They had apologetically explained they simply couldn't afford it, suggesting I take out additional student loans. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. You mortgaged the house and dipped into your retirement to give Mason almost $200,000 for a business with no proven track record, but you couldn't help me with $15,000 for my education? My mother looked pained. Ethan, that's not fair. You've always been so capable, so independent. Mason needs more support to get on his feet. And my student loans? My 3 jobs? That's just me being capable. You're doing fine. My father interjected. Your grades are excellent, you're managing. Mason needs this opportunity. The front door slammed, and Mason strolled in, wearing a brand new suit I later learned had been purchased on our parents' credit card as a business expense. Hey, little brother! He greeted me with the casual confidence of someone who never had to worry about his place in the family. Mom tell you about my new venture? You should see the store, it's awesome. The family dinner that followed was surreal. Mason dominated the conversation with grand plans for his business, speaking with the unearned authority of someone who never held a job longer than 3 months. My parents hung on his every word, offering encouragement and suggestions. Not once did anyone ask about my studies, my multiple jobs, or the toll it was taking on me. When Mason mentioned hiring an assistant because the paperwork is such a drag, something inside me snapped. Are you serious? I interrupted. You haven't even opened yet, and you're already planning to hire staff with Mom and Dad's retirement money? The table fell silent. Mason looked offended. It's an investment in the business. And what business experience do you have, exactly? What classes have you taken? What research have you done beyond deciding you like sports memorabilia? Ethan, my father warned. That's enough. No, it's not nearly enough. I countered. They mortgaged their house for you. Mason. Their house. Do you even understand what that means? If your business fails, it won't fail, Mason said confidently. But if it does, I persisted, they could lose everything. Meanwhile, I'm working 3 jobs to avoid asking them for money, and when I did need help, I was told there wasn't any to spare. My mother reached for my hand. Honey, we know you're working hard, and we're so proud of you. But Mason needs this chance. You're already on a successful path. The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. I'd been punished for being responsible, for working hard, for not causing problems. Mason had been rewarded for the opposite. I left the next morning instead of staying the weekend as planned. Before departing, I tried one more time to make my parents understand the disparity in their treatment. I'm not asking you to give me what you gave Mason, I said as I stood at the door with my overnight bag. I'm just asking you to recognize what this looks like from my perspective. You've leveraged your financial security for his untested business idea but told me you couldn't help with my education. My father sighed. When you have children of your own someday, you'll understand that different children need different things. Mason needs this opportunity. You're already succeeding on your own. I looked at them both, the parents who had raised me but never really seen me, and realized nothing I said would change their perspective. I hope his business works out, I said finally. For all your sakes. Back at university, the weight of what had happened settled heavily on me. During office hours with Professor Douglas Bennett, my programming mentor, he noticed my distraction. Ethan, you seem off today. Everything all right? Something about his genuine concern broke through my usual stoicism. I found myself explaining the situation. The years of differential treatment culminating in this final betrayal. Professor Bennett listened without interruption, then leaned back in his chair. That's a heavy burden to carry. But you know what I see? A remarkably resilient young man who's going to succeed despite, not because of, his circumstances. That conversation marked a turning point. With Professor Bennett's encouragement, I decided to completely financially separate from my family. I took out additional student loans, increased my work hours, and accepted that I was entirely on my own. The decision was painful but necessary for my self-respect. That night, I sat alone in my cramped apartment and made a promise to myself. I would never again measure my worth by my family's recognition. I would build my own life on my own terms. And someday, I would create a family where no child felt less valued than another. The campus library became my sanctuary during those difficult months following the mortgage revelation. Late one night, as I was drowning in code for my advanced algorithms project, I noticed a young woman at the next table struggling with similar work. "Segmentation fault?" I asked, recognizing the frustrated expression of a fellow programmer. She looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" "Your expression. I've worn it many times." I introduced myself and offered to help. Her name was Grace Harrison, a junior computer science major who had transferred from a tech school. With dark curly hair often gathered in a messy bun and an infectious laugh that defied library rules, Grace quickly became more than just a study partner. Over coffee breaks during marathon coding sessions, our conversations deepened. Unlike me, Grace came from a supportive family. Her father David was an architect. Her mother Margaret a pediatrician, who celebrated her achievements and encouraged her ambitions without comparison to her siblings. "Wait," she said one night after I'd shared a particularly telling story about my childhood birthday parties. "They really took Mason to Disney World for his 16th while you got tickets to a local baseball game for yours?" I shrugged. "They said Mason needed the confidence boost after failing 2 classes." Grace shook her head. "Ethan, that's not normal. You know that, right?" It was the same thing Tyler had been telling me for years. But somehow hearing it from Grace, with her perspective as someone who'd experienced healthy family dynamics, made it sink in differently. 3 months into our relationship, I finally told Grace about the house mortgage situation. We were at her small off-campus apartment, making dinner together. "They did what?" Grace nearly dropped the pasta strainer. "Almost $200. 000 for a memorabilia shop with no business plan? And they couldn't help you with $15,000 for tuition?" When she put it that way, the injustice seemed even starker. "What does your brother even know about running a business?" she asked. "Nothing. He took one marketing class before dropping out because it was too corporate." Grace's outrage on my behalf was strangely healing. She saw the situation with clarity unclouded by years of familiar manipulation. As senior year approached, Professor Bennett recommended me for an internship at Technova, a growing software company. The internship led to a job offer upon graduation, a position as a junior developer with a starting salary that exceeded anything I had imagined possible. "They're offering relocation assistance to Silicon Valley," I told Grace excitedly. We'd been dating for nearly a year by then. Her face fell slightly. "That's amazing, Ethan. You absolutely deserve it. It's just..." "What?" "I've been offered a position with DataSphere in the same area," she admitted. "I was afraid to tell you because I wasn't sure about your plans after graduation." We stared at each other for a moment before breaking into laughter. Both of us had been worried about post-graduation separation, not realizing we'd been offered jobs in the same city. 2 months after graduation, Grace and I moved to California together. We found a modest apartment halfway between our respective companies and began building our life together. I called my parents to share the news of my new job and location. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, though I detected distraction in her voice. "Silicon Valley, how exciting. How's Mason's business going?" I asked, already suspecting the answer from their subdued response to my news. "Well," my mother hesitated. "There have been some challenges. The retail market isn't what it used to be, with online competition and all. I later learned from a hometown friend that Mason's store had been hemorrhaging money from the start. He'd overspent on inventory that wasn't selling, hired unnecessary staff, and frequently closed early to go golfing with friends. Within 18 months of opening, Mason Sports Legends shut its doors permanently, leaving my parents with nothing but debt to show for their investment. Around the same time, I received my first promotion at Technova. My team's project had been successfully implemented, and my contributions had been specifically highlighted by the senior developers. My salary increased substantially, and I was given more responsibility. When I called home with this news, the response was tellingly brief. My father offered congratulations while my mother quickly changed the subject to ask if I could help with their home internet setup remotely. Neither mentioned Mason, but the background tension was palpable. It was Tyler who filled me in during our monthly video chat. "Dude, Mason moved back home. Your parents are in serious financial trouble after the business tanked. They've been asking people for loans, including my parents." The news should have given me some satisfaction, vindication that my concerns had been justified, but instead, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for my parents' situation, frustration at their choices, and a lingering hurt that they had risked everything for Mason while denying me much smaller support. As my career accelerated, my relationship with Grace deepened. After 3 years together, during a weekend trip to Napa Valley, I proposed at sunset overlooking a vineyard. Grace, tears streaming down her face, said yes without hesitation. That night, as we celebrated with champagne, Grace asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Are you going to ask your parents to be involved in the wedding?" I stared into my glass, watching the bubbles rise and disappear. "I don't know. Part of me wants to invite them as guests only, with no input or responsibilities. Another part wonders if this could be a fresh start." "Whatever you decide," Grace said, squeezing my hand. "I'm with you. But remember, this is our day. No one else's." I nodded, not yet realizing how prophetic her words would prove to be, or how my parents would attempt to make even this milestone about their preferences, their needs, and ultimately, about Mason. Breaking the engagement news to my parents was surprisingly pleasant. My mother squealed with delight when I called, and my father offered genuine-sounding congratulations. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that time and distance had healed some wounds. "We're so happy for you, Ethan," my mother gushed. "Grace sounds wonderful. We can't wait to meet her family and start planning." That phrase, "start planning," should have triggered warning bells, but I was too caught up in the rare feeling of parental approval to notice. 2 weeks later, Grace and I flew to my hometown for a long weekend to introduce our families. The initial dinner went surprisingly well. Grace's parents, David and Margaret Harrison, were warm but observant people who asked thoughtful questions about my work and our life in California. My parents were on their best behavior, sharing funny stories from my childhood that notably excluded Mason, who had moved into his own apartment but attended the dinner. It wasn't until the next day, when we gathered to discuss preliminary wedding ideas, that the facade cracked. "So," my mother began, spreading out bridal magazines on the dining table, "I've been thinking St. Matthew's Church would be perfect for the ceremony. It's where Robert and I married, and the reception hall can hold up to 200 guests." Grace and I exchanged glances. We had already discussed wanting a beach ceremony in California, where most of our friends lived. "Actually, Mom," I said carefully, "we're thinking of a beach wedding near our home in California. Something smaller, maybe 75 people maximum." My mother's smile tightened. "Oh, but Ethan, a church wedding is so much more proper. And what about all our relatives here? Aunt Judith can't possibly travel that far with her arthritis. We understand not everyone will be able to make it," Grace said gently, "but our life is in California now. Most of our friends are there, and my extended family is mostly on the West Coast too." "Well," my father interjected, "traditional weddings happen in the bride's hometown anyway. Perhaps near Grace's parents?" Margaret Harrison cleared her throat. "Actually, we're completely supportive of Ethan and Grace having the wedding where they feel most comfortable. It's their day. After all, The planning meeting deteriorated from there. Every preference Grace and I expressed, from the casual attire we wanted to the non-religious ceremony, was met with resistance from my parents. "But what will people think?" became my mother's refrain, as though the wedding's primary purpose was maintaining her social standing rather than celebrating our commitment. The final straw came 3 weeks later when Grace received a call from her mother. "Honey," Margaret said hesitantly, "I received a strange email from Karen Reynolds. She's asking about our contribution to the wedding budget and sent a spreadsheet of expected costs split evenly between the families." Grace was confused. "But we never discussed that arrangement. Ethan and I are paying for the wedding ourselves. We've been clear about that." "That's what I thought," Margaret replied. "David and I are happy to contribute if you'd like." But Karen's message implied this was already agreed upon. When confronted, my mother was unapologetic. "It's traditional for the families to share the costs. I was just being proactive." "Mom, we explicitly told you we're handling the expenses," I reminded her. "Grace and I are established professionals. We don't need financial help." The unspoken truth hung between us. After the Mason debacle, I wouldn't have accepted their money even if they'd had it to offer, which they clearly didn't. The situation escalated when wedding invitations arrived at our California apartment, invitations we hadn't ordered, featuring a design we hadn't chosen, for a ceremony at St. Matthew's Church on a date we hadn't selected. "Your mother was just trying to help," my father explained when I called, furious. "She knows you're both busy with your careers." "Dad, this isn't helping. This is hijacking. You need to tell Mom to cancel these immediately." "Son, be reasonable. Deposits have been made. Announcements have gone out to the family." The revelation that my parents had been telling relatives about wedding plans that directly contradicted our wishes was the breaking point. Grace's usual patience had worn thin. "Ethan," she said that night, "I love you, and I want to marry you. But this situation with your parents is out of control. They're not respecting our boundaries or our wishes." She was right. After years of accepting second-class status in my family, I was allowing them to diminish what should have been one of the happiest times in our lives. The final confrontation came during a video call that included both sets of parents. My mother had been pushing for Mason to be my best man, despite the fact that I'd already asked Tyler. "I just think it would mean so much to your brother," she insisted. "He's been through a rough time since the business closed." Something in me snapped. "And whose fault is that, Mom? Who mortgaged their house for a business that any reasonable person could see was doomed to fail? Who has consistently prioritized Mason over me my entire life? That's not fair, Ethan." My father jumped in. "We've always supported both our sons." "Really? When Grace and I needed tuition help, you had nothing to spare, but you found $200,000 for Mason's hobby shop. When I graduated valedictorian, you barely acknowledged it, but Mason passing with C- was cause for celebration. You've always been jealous of your brother," my mother said dismissively. "No, Mom. I've always been hurt by my parents. There's a difference." Mason, surprisingly, spoke up. "Mom, Dad, Ethan's right. You've always given me more. I never really appreciated it until I saw how hard he's worked for everything he has." My mother looked shocked at this betrayal from her favorite son. "We're just trying to help make this wedding special," she said defensively. "The wedding is already special," Grace interjected firmly. "It's special because Ethan and I love each other and are committing our lives to one another. We don't need St. Matthew's Church or your guest list or your vision to make it special." David Harrison, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Karen, Robert, with all due respect, this is Ethan and Grace's wedding. If you can't support their choices, perhaps it would be better if you simply attended as guests, without further involvement in the planning." The ultimatum came the next day via email. "If you insist on this California beach wedding without proper family input, we may not be able to attend. Consider what message that would send to the family. Grace held me as I read the message. Anger and hurt washing over me in waves. What do you want to do? She asked softly. I looked at the amazing woman who had stood by me, who had helped me see my worth beyond my family's validation. I want to marry you on the beach, surrounded by people who genuinely support us. If my parents can't be those people, that's their choice. We proceeded with our original plans, sending out our own invitations for a sunset beach ceremony in Malibu. The responses from my extended family were mixed. Some expressed confusion about the change of plans, while others sent warm congratulations. Through it all, Grace's family remained supportive, never once making me feel that their daughter was marrying beneath her station. As the wedding date approached, the silence from my parents grew deafening. Would they make good on their threat to boycott the most important day of my life? And more importantly, was I prepared to get married without them there? 1 month before the wedding, Mason surprisingly reached out to me directly, something he'd rarely done throughout our lives. Can we meet when you're in town next weekend for the final venue walkthrough? He asked over the phone. Just you and me. Curious and cautious, I agreed to breakfast at a diner away from our parents' house. Mason arrived looking different than I remembered, the cocky posture replaced with something more subdued, more thoughtful. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he began after ordering coffee. About how Mom and Dad treated us differently. I braced myself for defensiveness, but instead, Mason continued. You were right. They've always given me more of everything, money, attention, second chances. I didn't see it for a long time because, well, when you're the favorite, why would you question it? His candor caught me off guard. What changed? Watching how they behaved about your wedding, for one thing. It's so obviously about what they want, not what you and Grace want. He paused. And honestly, the business failure was a wake-up call. They gave me everything I needed to succeed, and I still couldn't make it work. Meanwhile, you've built this impressive career with minimal support. This acknowledgement from Mason, the recognition I'd craved for years, felt both validating and strangely hollow, coming so late. I've talked to them, Mason continued. Tried to make them see how unfair they're being. They don't get it. They're convinced they're right, that they know what's best for your wedding. And what do you think? I asked. I think it's your wedding, he said simply. And I'd like to be there, if you'll still have me. Not as best man, I know that's Tyler's role, but as your brother, supporting your choices. That conversation with Mason gave me the strength for what came next. A final family dinner at my parents' house, with Grace and her parents in attendance. I knew it might be our last chance to resolve the tension before the wedding. The evening began cordially enough, with stilted small talk about the weather and local news. But when my mother brought up last-minute adjustments to the guest list, I knew it was time. Mom, Dad, I said firmly, setting down my fork. There are no adjustments to discuss. The invitations have been sent for the wedding Grace and I planned. The only decision left is whether you'll be attending. Of course we'll attend, my mother said with a tight smile. We're just concerned about the impression this hasty beach ceremony will make. Hasty? Grace echoed. We've been planning this for 6 months. What your mother means, my father interjected, is that certain traditions are important. The bride's parents typically have significant input. And we've had that input. David Harrison interrupted politely but firmly. We've supported Ethan and Grace's vision because it's their wedding, not ours. Well, different families have different approaches, my mother replied with a dismissive wave. This isn't about different approaches, I said, feeling years of repressed frustration bubbling up. This is about you trying to control an event that isn't yours to control. Just like you've tried to control the narrative about our family my entire life. What narrative? My father asked, genuinely confused. The narrative that Mason's needs always come first. That his failures deserve more support than my successes. That I should be grateful for scraps of attention, while you mortgage your future for his ventures. That's not fair, Ethan. My mother protested. Isn't it? I challenged. When I needed help with tuition, you said you couldn't afford it. Months later, you took out a second mortgage for Mason's business. When I graduated top of my class, it was barely acknowledged, but Mason passing with minimum grades was celebrated. Every single milestone in my life has been overshadowed by whatever Mason happened to be doing. Mason, surprisingly, spoke up. They're right, Mom, Dad. You've always favored me. And I was too self-centered to notice or care. My mother looked stricken. We've only ever tried to give both our boys what they needed. No, I corrected her. You gave Mason what he wanted and me what you thought I could handle. There's a big difference. The room fell silent. Margaret Harrison, ever the peacemaker, gently redirected the conversation. Karen, Robert, perhaps we could focus on how to move forward positively. Ethan and Grace have been very clear about their wedding plans. The question is, can you support them? My parents exchanged glances, and I could see the struggle playing out across their faces, the desire to maintain control battling with the fear of being excluded from this significant event. I just want what's best for you, my mother said finally, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Then trust that I know what that is, I replied. Trust that the man you raised is capable of making his own decisions about his own wedding. Grace reached for my hand under the table, a silent show of solidarity that gave me strength. The beach wedding is happening, I continued. Tyler is my best man. We're having the casual, intimate ceremony we want. You can either support that and be part of one of the happiest days of my life, or you can stand on principle and miss it. But this isn't up for negotiation. The ultimatum hung in the air. My father cleared his throat. Son, you have to understand. No, Dad, I cut him off. For once, you have to understand. This isn't about you. It's about Grace and me starting our life together on our terms. The dinner ended without resolution. My parents retreating into wounded silence while Grace's parents tried valiantly to maintain polite conversation. As we prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. We'll think about what you've said, she offered, which was neither an acceptance nor a rejection. In the car afterward, Grace's father spoke what everyone was thinking. They might not come. Ethan, are you prepared for that? I looked at Grace, drawing strength from her unwavering support. Yes, I answered. I've spent my life adjusting to their conditional love. I won't do it on our wedding day. The weeks that followed were quiet. My parents didn't call, and I didn't reach out to them. Grace worried about my feelings, but in truth, I felt lighter having finally articulated years of hurt and set clear boundaries. 1 week before the wedding, as Grace and I finalized details with our wedding planner in Malibu, I received a text from Mason. They're coming. No promises about their attitude, but they'll be there. A complex mix of relief and anxiety washed over me. My parents would witness our marriage. But would their presence be a blessing or a complication? Only time would tell. The morning of our wedding dawned with perfect California weather, clear blue skies, gentle breezes, and temperatures mild enough for the light linen suits and flowing dresses we'd chosen for our beach ceremony. I stood in our rented beach house, adjusting my tie while Tyler offered running commentary on my apparent inability to dress myself. After 4 years of computer science, you'd think you could solve the algorithm of a Windsor knot, he teased, finally stepping in to help. Code doesn't make me nervous, I replied. Knowing my parents are going to be sitting in the front row might. Tyler's expression softened. Hey. Whatever happens with them today, remember what matters, you and Grace. Everything else is just background noise. A knock at the door revealed Professor Bennett, my former mentor who had become a friend and father figure over the years. He'd flown in from the East Coast at my invitation. Professor! I greeted him with a warm handshake that turned into a hug. I think we're well past the professor stage, Ethan. He chuckled. Douglas is fine. And look at you, about to get married. A far cry from the exhausted junior I found falling asleep in my advanced programming lab. As we caught up, my phone buzzed with a message from Mason. Parents just arrived at the hotel. Dad seems fine. Mom's been quiet. We'll be at the venue in an hour. My stomach tightened. Despite setting clear boundaries, part of me still feared my parents would find some way to express their disapproval, or make the day about them. Grace and I had opted against the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony. When I entered her preparation room, she took my breath away in her simple but elegant gown. Her dark curls adorned with small white flowers. You look incredible, I said, feeling the stress of family dynamics momentarily fade. She smiled, touching my face gently. So do you. Are you ready for this? To marry you? More than ready. To face my parents? Getting there. As predicted, my parents arrived exactly 1 hour before the ceremony. I spotted them on the beach from the house's deck, my mother in a conservative blue dress that was far too formal for our casual beach setting. My father looking uncomfortable in a full suit despite the heat. I should go talk to them, I said to Grace, who squeezed my hand in support. Walking across the sand to greet them felt like crossing a battlefield. Mason saw me coming and nudged my parents, who turned with expressions I couldn't quite read. You made it, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Of course we did, my father replied stiffly. You're our son. My mother looked around at the beach setup, the simple white chairs, the floral arch, the string lights waiting to be illuminated as evening fell. It's different than I imagined, she said, which from her was almost a compliment. Could we speak privately? My father asked, gesturing toward a quiet spot away from the gathering guests. Apprehension filled me, but I nodded and followed my parents to a driftwood log several yards away. Mason tactfully remained behind. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking, my father began once we were seated. Robert, my mother interrupted. Let me. She turned to face me fully. Ethan, we owe you an apology. Not just for how we've behaved about the wedding, but for a lot of things over the years. The unexpected words stunned me into silence. Mason helped us see some things we didn't want to admit. She continued. We've not been fair to you. We've expected more from you and given you less support, and that wasn't right. We told ourselves we were responding to each of you based on your needs. My father added. But looking back, I can see how our actions must have seemed to you. Their words were what I'd longed to hear for decades, yet something about the timing felt calculated. Why now? I asked. Why on my wedding day? Because we nearly missed it. My mother said simply. When we realized you were prepared to get married without us here, it forced us to look at how our behavior had driven you away. We don't want to lose you, Ethan. I studied their faces, searching for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to detecting. Instead, I saw something new: uncertainty, vulnerability, and what appeared to be genuine regret. I appreciate that, I said carefully. And I want you here today. But this doesn't erase years of favoritism or fix everything between us. That will take time and consistent effort. We understand. My father nodded. We're just asking for the chance to do better. As guests began taking their seats, I made a decision. Let's enjoy today for what it is. A celebration of love and new beginnings. Maybe that can apply to more than just my marriage. The ceremony itself was everything Grace and I had envisioned. As the sun began its descent toward the Pacific, casting golden light across the water, we exchanged vows we'd ridden ourselves. Tyler stood proudly as my best man, while Grace's sister served as maid of honor. Mason sat in the front row beside our parents, his supportive smile a new and welcome sight. Professor Bennett read a passage about growth and resilience that felt particularly meaningful given my journey. When Grace and I were pronounced husband and wife, The cheers from our assembled friends and colleagues, people who had known and supported us as a couple, felt like a validation of the life we built together. The reception, held under string lights on a beachfront patio, was casual and joyful. Grace's parents moved comfortably among the guests, chatting easily with our California friends. My parents made visible efforts to engage, though I could see my mother's occasional discomfort with the informal atmosphere. The contrast between the two families was never more apparent than during the toasts. David Harrison spoke warmly about welcoming me to their family, sharing funny anecdotes about getting to know me and expressing genuine happiness about our union. When my father took the microphone, his speech was more generic, with few personal details about Grace or our relationship, a reminder of how little he'd invested in knowing the woman I loved. Yet there were moments of genuine connection too. I spotted my mother deep in conversation with Grace's aunt, laughing at some shared observation. My father asked thoughtful questions about my recent promotion when we had a moment alone. Small steps, perhaps, but steps nonetheless. The most surprising moment came when Mason approached us on the dance floor, champagne in hand. "I proposed a toast earlier," he said, "but there's something I wanted to say to just the two of you." He looked at Grace. "Thank you for making my brother happy and for standing by him when our family didn't. And Ethan." His voice caught slightly. "I'm sorry for not seeing sooner how unfairly you were treated. I'm working on being the brother you deserve." As Mason hugged us both and walked away, Grace squeezed my hand. "That seemed genuine," she observed. "It did," I agreed, watching my brother join a group of Grace's cousins, fitting in with an ease I'd always envied. "Today has been full of surprises. Good ones, I hope?" I pulled her closer as the music slowed. "The best one was becoming your husband. Everything else is just bonus material." As the night progressed, I found myself observing my parents with new eyes, not as the infallible authorities of my childhood nor as the villains of my young adulthood, but as flawed humans who had made mistakes they might genuinely wish to correct. Whether their epiphany would translate to lasting change remained to be seen. But as Grace and I departed amid sparklers and well-wishes, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Not just for our future as a married couple, but for the possibility of a healthier relationship with the family I'd come from, even as I embraced the family we would build together. Our 2-week honeymoon in New Zealand provided the perfect opportunity to process everything that had happened. Surrounded by stunning landscapes far removed from family dynamics, Grace and I hiked mountains, explored caves, and spent evenings discussing our future. "What did you make of your parents at the wedding?" Grace asked one night as we sat beside a lake, the southern hemisphere stars reflecting on its surface. "I'm cautiously optimistic," I admitted. "Their apology seemed sincere, but I've seen them make temporary efforts before. Real change would mean consistent behavior over time." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "What would that look like to you? What would you need to see from them to rebuild trust?" It was a profound question that forced me to consider what I truly wanted from my relationship with my parents moving forward. "Recognition," I said finally. "Not just words, but actions that show they see me, my accomplishments, my choices, my life with you, as valuable in their own right, not in comparison to Mason. And consistency. Not reverting to old patterns when it's convenient." "That's fair," Grace said. "And reasonable." "What about you?" I asked. "You're part of this family now, too. What do you need from them?" "Respect for our boundaries," she answered without hesitation. "I can forgive the wedding planning drama if they understand that our decisions as a couple are ours to make." When we returned home, I was surprised to find a handwritten letter from Mason waiting in our mail. Unlike the text messages and occasional phone calls that had characterized our relationship, this was something he'd put real thought into. "I've been doing a lot of reflection," he wrote, "about the business failure, about how Mom and Dad raised us, about the kind of brother I've been. The truth is, I've been selfish and entitled for most of my life, and I never considered how that affected you. I'm working on changing that. I've enrolled in community college again. Paying my own way this time. I've moved into a smaller apartment and gotten a job at a local sporting goods store. It's nothing like your success, but it's honest work, and for once, I'm standing on my own 2 feet. The letter continued with specific memories, times he'd watched our parents favor him and said nothing, opportunities he'd taken that should have been mine, and sincere apologies for each. It was the most self-aware I'd ever seen my brother. Grace found me sitting quietly with the letter. Everything okay? I handed it to her. I think Mason might actually be growing up. In the months that followed, small but meaningful changes emerged in my family dynamics. My mother began calling regularly, asking questions about my work that showed she'd researched programming concepts to better understand my career. My father sent links to tech articles he thought might interest me. Neither mentioned Mason unless I asked first. 6 months after our wedding, Grace and I invited both sets of parents to our home for dinner. The contrast between the families remained, but the tension had eased. My parents made genuine efforts to engage with Grace's parents, finding common ground in gardening and travel stories. As we cleared dishes after dessert, my father pulled me aside. Son, there's something I need to tell you. Your mother and I have been meeting with a family therapist. We're trying to understand where we went wrong and how to do better. The admission, so at odds with my father's usual stoic self-sufficiency, moved me. That takes courage, Dad. Less courage than it took for you to stand up to us all these years. He replied quietly. We should have listened sooner. Not all moments were so positive. When Grace and I announced we were expecting our first child, my mother's immediate response was concern about how far away we lived rather than joy about becoming a grandmother. Old habits died hard. But when I pointed this out directly, she caught herself and redirected to genuine congratulations, progress of a sort. Mason's evolution proved perhaps the most surprising. He completed an associate's degree in business administration and secured an entry-level position at an athletic equipment company. When he visited us after learning about Grace's pregnancy, he brought thoughtfully selected gifts and not once mentioned financial difficulties or needs of his own. I want to be a good uncle, he told us. The kind who shows up consistently and supports however I can. One conversation with Mason particularly stood out. We were walking along the beach near our home when he broached a difficult subject. I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear, he said, stopping to face the ocean. The business didn't fail because of bad luck or market conditions. It failed because I was irresponsible. I spent money on unnecessary things, didn't keep proper records, took long lunches instead of working. I knew Mom and Dad had leveraged everything for me, and I still couldn't take it seriously. His candor surprised me. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve better, he said simply. You deserve parents who recognized your hard work and supported your dreams the way they supported mine. And you deserved a brother who appreciated the disparity instead of exploiting it. As Grace's pregnancy progressed, my parents made efforts to be supportive without overstepping. My mother asked permission before purchasing nursery items, and my father set up a modest college fund for the baby without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. When our son James was born on a rainy Tuesday in March, both sets of grandparents came to the hospital, watching my mother hold him with tears in her eyes. I felt the complicated tangle of past hurt and present hope that characterized our evolving relationship. He has your eyes, she whispered, looking up at me. The same curious expression you had as a baby. It was perhaps the first time she'd ever noted a resemblance to me rather than comparing me to Mason or other relatives. The simple observation felt like a milestone. As James grew from newborn to infant, I found myself hyper-aware of how Grace and I treated him, vigilant against any patterns that might echo my own upbringing. You're a wonderful father, Grace assured me one night after finding me reading parenting books at 2 a.m. You know what not to do because you lived it. The final family gathering of that transformative year took place at our home for James's first Christmas. Watching my parents interact with Grace's family, more comfortably now, with inside jokes and genuine affection developing, I realized how far we'd all come. After dinner, as everyone relaxed in the living room, I stood holding James by the Christmas tree, momentarily overwhelmed by reflection. My father approached, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "May I?" he asked, reaching for his grandson. As I placed James in his arms, my father spoke softly. "I want you to know something, Ethan. Watching you with James has made me see more clearly what we did wrong with you and Mason. The way you attend to him, the way you're present, it's what we should have done. I had good examples of what not to do," I said, not unkindly. He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "You're breaking the cycle. That takes tremendous strength." Later that night, after all our guests had departed and Grace had gone to bed, I sat alone with James sleeping on my chest. Looking down at his peaceful face, I made a silent promise. "You will never wonder if you're enough. You will never feel less valued than anyone else. You will always know you are loved completely, just as you are." The journey from being the overlooked second son to creating my own family had been longer and more painful than it should have been. The scars of my childhood would never completely fade, and my relationship with my parents would always carry the echoes of past wounds. But in choosing to remain connected while maintaining firm boundaries, I'd found a path toward healing that honored both my past and my future. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see their own favoritism? How did you handle building your own life while dealing with parents who treated siblings differently? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Your story might help someone feeling alone in a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys of overcoming family challenges and building a better future. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve equal love and respect, regardless of family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you can't choose your family of origin, but you can choose what patterns you carry forward, and which ones you leave behind. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.